Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today we have quite a conversation you are really going to enjoy. Very special, unique, because here in Studio One, the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, we're going to be talking with seeker and healer, Jane Callen. Hi, Jane. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure thing. So this is going to be a little bit different than our normal Planetary Gig Talk conversation, because I introduced you as a healer and seeker, and you're much more than that. You're a dear friend, and we have spent a lot of time in the evenings playing music with friends, and it's been such a pleasure. And so we certainly do have a bond through music. But also we've talked about your work in the health field, and what this unique instrument that you have called a Body Tambura.
That's right.
And that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's sort of the side of music being vibrations and healing vibrations, and this kind of takes it to a new level. It's very unique, so I'm really interested in talking with you about that. So could you maybe just describe a little bit about what you do, and that, how you got to this place, in your life and all?
So let's see. I arrived at this Body Tambura. My eyes keep going down to it here as we sit in the studio.
Yeah, it's in the studio. The Body Tambura is in the studio.
Yeah, I guess maybe we should describe it, since it's sort of the third entity that's in the room with us.
Sure.
Even though it's quiet at the moment. So it's about I'm going to say 2.5 feet long by about 1 foot wide and maybe 6 inches deep. Does that sound right to you?
And it's wooden. It's like a wooden box a little bit.
It's like a wooden box. It's a zither. So you strum it. You don't really pick it. And it has 30 strings on it. 30 strings, 28 of which are in D, and then 2 are in A. And I arrived at my relationship with this Body Tambura because I was sitting at the fire department where I volunteer maybe 2 years ago, the local Gleneco Fire Department, and I was doing a lit review for school. I was in the middle of an MSW program, night school, and in this lit review there was a discussion about one of the papers I came across was centered on a hospice in southern India, a hospice that served the extreme impoverished. So there were maybe 300 patients in this hospice at any given time, most of whom had been scooped up from the streets. And the promise that was made by the priest who began this hospice program was that they would be clothed in one set of robes, and they would be fed to the extent that they were still taking in nutrients and food. These are people at the end of life, obviously, but they could not afford, the people managing the hospice could not afford any analgesics for them. In other words, they would die with no pain medicine. And so it was dismal. I mean, better than if they had continued to lay and die on the streets, but nevertheless, a death without any intervention can be pretty wretched and tragic.
Yeah, and before you continue on with the story, I'd like, do you mind just giving a little bit of background? I mean, you're a EMT as well, and you've done relief work in several different places. Puerto Rico recently, but I think Bhutan. Were you?
Nepal. Yeah. So yes, I am. I'm an EMT, and that that began, I volunteered for Katrina, so that would have been 2005. My day job is doing statistics, writing about statistics, economic statistics primarily, and releasing them for the Commerce Department to the public. About 11 times a month I do these briefings on data. And so there was this other part of my heart that felt that was seeking something more than what came to me through the world of economic statistics.
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
And when Katrina happened, and I and my husband also headed out down to New Orleans for 3 weeks. And while I was there, I saw, we were volunteering of our time, but we didn't necessarily have particular talents to offer them. A government lawyer and a government statistical person. And so while I was there, I witnessed these volunteer EMTs, and they were doing the cool stuff, and they were in high demand. And I thought, when I get home, I want to learn how to do that. And so we got back 3 weeks later, and I marched into the local fire department and said, if you'll have me, 40-something-year-old woman, I'd love to do this.
Yeah, and you've been very active at the local fire department, and I know doing a great job up there and all that. But then you also got into hospice.
Yeah.
Through in a very personal way.
I did, and I hospiced my own mother. I watched as my father was dying about 15 years ago, and he did not have a positive hospice experience. The people who came in presumed a lot about what he wanted and who he was without really asking him or his family. And so that was difficult for us, and it occurred to me at the end of that painful process that it didn't have to be that way, that in fact this was an opportunity as someone is dying to find a way to make the death sweeter, if that's a word that can resonate for you or for those who might be listening, that we so often enthusiastically discuss the first bookend in this life process, but
right.
We're really hesitant to talk about death. And yet it's so important, and it can be, magical and mystical and beautiful, and in its own way, it can be healing. And so that was kind of an epiphany, realizing as after witnessing my father and beginning to learn about and study about the dying process, I realized there's a place for this in this world, and whatever I can do to try to help people see that it's available to them, that's a beautiful thing. And so that was part of this, the healing journey around death and around also the fire rescue work at the fire station, kind of all came together in this beautiful way.
Yeah, and I certainly know what you're talking about. My own mother lived to be 100, but she was ready to go for a long time before that, and the dying process is really important, and it's a key part of life, really. So, when you hospiced your mom at home, and I was around for some of that, I just thought that's amazing. Jane is such a strong woman to be able to do this, and but anyway, so it was quite an experience for a lot of people when you did that.
Yeah, I felt really fortunate to have all of you around when she was going through that, because it's not one person who does it. It's a whole community that really everyone was part of her transition and her journey, and making her feel okay about it, and visiting her and talking to her openly about what she wanted. And I remember at one point a group of friends gathered around her bedside, and this was not long before she passed, and we were rewriting the words to "You Are My Sunshine" so that they would resonate with her, and she was part of that. She understood we would sing that as we cleansed her body as she was dying, and then as we washed her body afterwards, and at her memorial service. And it was a beautiful, inclusive event that really, I think, made her feel like she was not off in a corner dying alone with something that no one would talk to her about.
Right. And that singing is healing in that respect. And that's really what we're going to talk about. So with that background and knowing that you were intrigued, well, continue the story of how you found out about the Body Tambura.
Yeah. So all of this came together that night, sitting at the fire station, doing my lit review for my Master's of Social Work, and coming across this study that was done at this hospice in southern India, right? So now we've got these people who are dying without analgesics, and they're in immense pain. And one of the people in the hospital, an Indian doctor, looked up and said, "Wait a minute. Our country has a long and rich tradition with music and the power of music in healing. And perhaps if we leverage that and exposed some of those who are dying to the power of beautiful music, it would mitigate the pain. Let's test it and see if that works." So they did. They brought in a tambura, and it was not the Body Tambura, and I'll explain the difference in a moment, but it was a traditional tambura, which is a stringed classical Indian instrument. And they exposed some of those who were in extreme pain to this instrument. They played it for them. And after 10 minutes of playing the tambura, their pain dropped markedly on the pain, a measurable, established, well-recognized pain scale. It dropped from, I think, a 10 to a 4. And then it's remarkable. And then after a second exposure, it dropped further, I think down to a 2. So really went, from overwhelming pain to negligible pain because of exposure to music. Yeah.
So you read about that, and then what did you do?
So then the next thing I did was Google it. Of course, I went to Dr. Google to see if anyone else had heard of this thing or used it, and saw that there was a hospice in England that was actively employing it. And so, again, I looked at the watch, realized it was 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. in England, and I called the guy at the hospice in England and said, introduced myself and said, "So I'm reading about this amazing research involving the use of a body tambura in hospice. Please tell me, what's your experience been?" And he did. He said it was remarkable that he had one, just next to him while we were talking, and he had used it, the day before. And I said, "It's difficult to learn," and he reassured me that it was not. And I said, "Well, what if your patients or clients really are not able to do it themselves?" And he talked about how you could lie it on their body and strum it for them, and it was remarkable. And I asked him where he got it, and he gave me the name of a luthier in Germany. And so I thanked him and hung up, and got on the phone again and called the luthier in Germany.
Wow. A woman of action. A woman of action.
Who didn't speak much English, but enough to understand my request, and I ordered one.
So, one of the things we have talked a lot on this podcast is about music being vibrations. I mean, we're vibrations. It is very powerful. It's kind of the discussion we want to have. I mean, I talked also to that kooky guy, Erasmus Caffrey, about the healing sounds of the universe through fonging, which, seems kind of weird, but, healing sounds does sort of resonate in a way, and doing
so to speak.
Yeah. And doing some research also. I mean, there's studies now about using music in surgery before patients go into surgery, while the surgeons are doing their thing, and that it can reduce the impact on the patient. They can, sort of resolve better. They may even need less in the way of pharmaceuticals or analgesics or whatever you call it. So, I think, and certainly there's music therapy where music is used affirmatively to help people, with issues, maybe mental or autistic folks, or music for Alzheimer's patients. So yes. We see a lot of different ways that music does have these healing effects. And I'll just say that before the show, Jane put the Body Tambura on me. I've had it before, and it's just kind of remarkable because it's these deep vibrations just kind of go into your body, and it feels like you're home in a sense.
Yes.
It feels like you can't really be worried about something else when you have this Body Tambura on you. And so, it's a remarkable instrument. You want to check it out for people and let them hear what it sounds like?
Sure.
Talk a little bit more
down
about
here
it?
And bring it up onto my lap and strum it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
a
while I'm
little
getting set
curved
up,
on
I'll
the
just-
bottom so it could sort of fit on somebody's chest, I guess.
Exactly. It's very lightweight. It is concave on the bottom. Yeah,
Depends on which way you look at it, I guess.
Right, as I look at it from the top down, different from the bottom. But yeah, concave on the bottom. And so you can lie it, and it will cover the entire torso unless someone is really quite tall. And
Right.
so far I've used it maybe, I'm going to say with probably 20 people who
Used
were
it-
in
people who were
palliative or
in
hospice,
hospice.
care, yes. And I don't know if we discussed this, but I am affiliated with a couple of different hospice programs. And so...
And you volunteer every week, do you? Or
I volunteer every week, sometimes several times a week.
Yeah, that's just amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful work. I feel like it's a real privilege entering into that sacred space, and also have had the great privilege of being there with, now both of my parents, a good friend, my aunt. As we age, the list grows and grows.
Yeah.
So here it is.
It's just amazing. I don't know what our listeners felt about that, but it's so whole. It's just remarkable. With the strings are a fifth, the D and the A, and a fifth is, I guess, 50%. It's over the regular note, so it's very mathematical in a sense as well. It's a very whole sound, like an octave, but it just generates such sort of powerful vibrations.
Yeah, even just playing it on my lap and feeling that. And there's something also so magical about what happens at the end. Once I stop strumming and I can feel, it continues, those waves continue to sort of bend their way through the universe. And I wish my father was a quantum mechanics university professor, physicist. And I so wish that he was here to sort of explain to me how long it takes for those and where they're going. But I know that they're long enough that they're sort of these slow moving, wonderfully curvaceous sound waves kind of wending their way up and out. And I imagine that similarly, as we're approaching the end of life, something like that may be happening. That the spirit, there's not a moment, right, when the spirit leaves the body, but that it is this transition, this journey. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of imagine, as I'm playing this on someone's torso who is moving through that transition, even if the last breath has not yet happened, that parts of their spirit are already wending their way out, into the universe in a very peaceful, beautiful, harmonious way. And it feels profoundly healing to me. I watch them relax. Sometimes when I arrive to visit someone, initially their fists are clenched or their brow is furrowed.
Uh-huh.
And over the course of the visit and playing this on them and for them, those things change. Everything softens. Peace sets in.
It really is remarkable. I'm just going to bring up a brief story that's in the music lesson, the book by Victor Wooten, and it's a quirky novel, but it's the best book ever. And there's a story about somebody who gets injured, and two characters run over and they start singing, and it kind of heals the guy. It sort of reorganizes his atoms or whatever, I don't know, cells, and it's a sort of mystical and imaginary in a sense, but I think there's a truth to that. There's a truth to that vibrations, you kind of come home to the vibrations. Yes. It can be just the way that, hearing music, playing music seems to have that peaceful, calming feel. Usually, there's hard rock and there's all different kinds of music, but in general, it helps us. We do feel home in a sense with it, and that certainly is what I felt with that when you played the Body Tambura on me.
I heard, I don't know that this is true, but when I was first learning about the instrument, and I wondered, well, why A and D? Someone suggested that our organs, in much the way that things have, I think it's called a sympathetic vibration. Everything has its own inherent frequency of resonance. Here again, I'm missing my father, the quantum mechanics physicist. But I was told that our organs, that their particular note at which they sympathetically vibrate is the same as this Body Tambura, and so that's why it is, in fact, these 30 strings are tuned to D for 28 of them and A for the other 2. Shall I play it once more before we...
Yeah, let me ask you one other question. In reading some other things, I read that there were only a few in England, and maybe they're more in India or whatever. It's kind of a new instrument that was designed, isn't it?
The tambura itself is quite old,
yeah,
but adapted as a body tambura. I'm not aware of any other ones in the United States. The luthier told me this was the first he was sending here. And I only came across the one at the Hospice in England. So I don't know where others exist. It's so powerful that my hope is that it can become more prevalent, because even if one does have access to other ways of mitigating the pain at the end of life, wouldn't it be nice if they had this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. This one may be the only one in the States, or there certainly aren't many, and it's just a real privilege to be able to, see it, feel it, talk about it, discuss the power of this form of music, this form of vibration, for a different thing that we normally think of. Of course, I guess we're all headed toward that place, and maybe music, even when you're young, helps you on the journey. So, sure, I'll play it one more time, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, here we go.
Wow, just fabulous. Thanks so much, Jane. Really appreciate your bringing this over and talking about it, taking the time to talk about it, and hopefully people will have learned something about this, and maybe we will see more of these in our, as we grow older, and they can be used in for healing around the country more.
Oh, it was so sweet being here, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.